After the Chicago Bulls were on top of the NBA world in the 1990s, dominating the league, running through teams and securing 6 NBA championships in the span of 8 years, the Bulls and their fans knew the highs would eventually come to an end to one of the greatest dynasties ever assembled. And after that last dance in 1998, and with the NBA lockout following that offseason, and the Bulls rehauling their roster with Michael Jordan retiring, Scottie Pippen leaving, and Dennis Rodman going their separate ways, Phil Jackson obviously no longer being the head coach of the team, the Bulls were going into a full-blown rebuild, looking to create a new team for the future. The Bulls went from being a 60-plus win team to a 13-win team in the lockout season, which was followed up by a 17-win season and a 15-win season the following years. Yes, both of those being full 82-game seasons, but it actually worked out for the Bulls because their awful record enabled them to land the #1 pick in the 1999 draft, which they used to select Elton Brand, who right away looked like a star in the making, having won Rookie of the Year and being the team's best player as a rookie. The Bulls subsequently landed the #4 pick in the following 2 drafts, although missed badly on those when they selected Marcus Fizer and Eddie Curry in 2000 and 2001. This, of course, after trading their best rookie they had landed in years in Elton Brand to pair up Curry and Tyson Chandler together, which failed miserably. But after the Bulls, after yet another terrible season in 2002, finishing with 21 wins, having won just 66 games in the span of 4 years, the Bulls lucked out and netted the #2 pick in the draft. And while most tanking teams wanted that #1 pick in the draft, and while most teams tanking wanted that #1 pick to draft the phenom out of China and Yao Ming, the Bulls, having already secured their big men in Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler, their eyes were fixed on the young point guard and top recruit out of Duke and Jay Williams, which of course the Bulls used that pick to select the expected point guard for the future. And in there lies the start of the curse of the point guard for the Chicago Bulls that seems to never be able to be shaken. And that's what we'll be discussing in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. If you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, or even if you've been around for a while, always feel free to provide feedback in the comments so I can continue improving the content and putting out video topics you guys would like to see discussed. About 42% of you watching are not subscribed to the channel. It would mean a great deal to me if you sub to help the channel grow. Also, guys, it's March Madness right now. You've got NBA playoff basketball coming up. Hopefully the Bulls will somehow find themselves in that. But with all the excitement in the coming weeks in sports, what better time than to try to make some money on the side while watching, which leads me into today's sponsor of the video, Underdog Fantasy. As I've said before, the offer aside, Underdog Fantasy is truly the easiest fantasy sports app to use and navigate with their user-friendly interface. My personal favorite that I use to play on the app is NBA Pick'ems. I mean, Underdog Fantasy has higher or lowers on most player stats. You can just pick higher or lower, and whether you think Zach is going to score more than 22 points when the Bulls get back to playing games again, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night if you do 5 pick'ems and get them all right. And guys, they're offering viewers of this channel an exclusive offer. If you use the code BullsCentral, you'll get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Who doesn't want free money, right? You can also follow along with my picks once you sign up, and we can even have some friendly competition. So I'll leave a link to the site and the code in the description if you're interested, and let me know what picks you guys end up making. But anyway, so the Bulls used their #2 pick in 2002 to select Jay Williams, who was a fantastic point guard out of Duke and expected to be a future star in the NBA. Very highly recruited out of high school, and while Jay Williams didn't have the best rookie season for the Bulls, he did start showing some flashes towards the end of the year as he started getting used to the pace and flow of an NBA game. But then, in the offseason, after his rookie year, Jay Williams had a career-ending motorcycle accident after crashing into a streetlight that nearly killed him. As he wasn't wearing a helmet, he also was not licensed to ride a motorcycle and was also violating the terms of his NBA contract by riding a motorcycle. The severe injuries that Jay Williams sustained prevented him from ever playing in the NBA again after having played just 1 season in the league, a careless mistake costing him his whole career, and for the Bulls, derailing their overall rebuild. Now fast forward to 2008. After some down years and some up years, Bulls finally made their way back to the playoffs. They actually won a playoff series, but after a disappointing year in 07 and 08, the Bulls somehow, after having just a 1.7% chance of landing the #1 pick, they hit the jackpot in getting that pick and used it to select the Chicago native and Derrick Rose, a kid who grew up watching the Bulls and was now playing for the franchise and was expected to be that point guard for the future the team had been searching for. And of course, we all know the story. Right away, Rose started rising to stardom after winning Rookie of the Year. In just his sophomore season, he was already selected to his first All-Star game, the Bulls' first All-Star selection since Michael Jordan in 1998, by the way. He would then go on, in just his 3rd year in the NBA, at age 22, lead the Bulls to 62 wins in the regular season, the best record in the NBA, and becoming the youngest player to ever win the MVP award. Rose's insane athleticism, incredible speed, and ball handling to get to the basket made him impossible to guard, and his court vision and ability to manage the floor was positioning the Bulls to finally, after over a decade, be a contender in the NBA again. But in the following season, after the Bulls having lost in the conference finals to the Miami Heat in 2011, the Bulls were poised to come back better than ever, more experienced and hungry after yet a disappointing conference finals, and after finishing with the best record in the NBA yet again. We all know what happened, and it pains me to even display the injury 11 years later. This image still haunts me, but Derrick Rose suffered a torn ACL in Game 1 of the first round of the 2012 playoffs, and despite the fact that the Bulls were actually still a decent team when playing without Rose, as they had done for a good portion of that season, the devastation of losing your star player in the playoffs and knowing he would likely be out for a good portion of the following season was too much for the roster, and they lost in that first round in 6 games. And while Rose was expected to make a full recovery from his ACL injury, we now know that despite the fact that he did eventually return, he was never the same player he once was, playing at an MVP level and that franchise level player, given the fact that he suffered subsequent injuries after tearing his ACL that would have him missing multiple games. And ultimately, just 4 years after that initial ACL injury, the Bulls moved on from Rose by trading him to the New York Knicks on the final year of his deal. Joakim Noah walked in free agency, Luol Deng was traded as well, and that young, high-energy, hard-nosed defensive team led by a young superstar that had so much promise was no more. And even though the Bulls searched and tried to find their point guard replacement in the form of guys like Kirk Heinrich after Jay Williams' injury, Rajon Rondo, and then later Chris Dunn and Kobe White, obviously that's after Derrick Rose, they simply were not at the same level as those guys who struggled with their own injuries as well. Namely Rondo, who missed the final playoff games that set the Bulls back in taking out the #1 seed Celtics after going up 2-0 on them in Boston, and then of course Chris Dunn having his own injury challenges during his tenure with the Bulls before the Bulls let him go as a restricted free agent. And after the Bulls were in search of their next point guard for the future, and it became clear that while yes, Kobe White was good, he wasn't going to be that point guard that they needed to help run an offense and be that facilitator that they needed for guys like Zach Lavine and Nikola Vucevic once they traded for him. The Bulls, after months of being linked to Lonzo Ball and trade rumors, were able to pull off a sign and trade where they would send Tomas Satoransky, Garrett Temple, and a second-round pick in exchange for Lonzo Ball, signing him to that 4-year, near $80 million deal. And at that time, it seemed like the fleece of a century. Sure, you could also have gotten Lonzo for nothing and signed him as a free agent, outbidding every other team, but by executing a sign and trade, the Bulls could claim his bird rights and allow them to operate over the cap, and getting Lonzo Ball for essentially a second-round pick because Sato and Temple were not going to be part of the Bulls' long-term plans, although I will say, I did like Temple a lot in his lone season with the Bulls, but getting Lonzo for that was a steal, until it wasn't, because as good as Lonzo was, and was perfect for the Bulls on this roster in terms of running the floor, turning defense into offense with great court vision and transition, his elite perimeter defense and three-point shooting, as good as all of that was, the best ability is availability in the NBA. And Lonzo has only played in 35 games for the Bulls since signing that 4-year deal. And there is now a real possibility of him not returning to the game of basketball. At a minimum, the final year of his deal is when he would return. This is, of course, after the news we learned days ago that Lonzo will require a 3rd surgery on his knee, which will sideline him for most, if not all, of next season. This is, of course, after missing all of this season and the back half of last season. And for the Bulls, you just kind of have to wonder, when is this going to end? Given all the nightmare scenarios that they have had, given all the nightmare scenarios that have happened to this franchise when it comes to player injuries at this position. And for Lonzo, the saga just keeps getting worse and worse, starting from a timeline of 6 to 8 weeks for a return to action after seeing his last action on the court in January 2022. Expectation was he would be ready for the playoffs. His rehab process was slow, the timeline kept getting pushed out until the Bulls shut him down for the season, including the playoffs. Most fans thought there was no way he wouldn't be ready to go by the start of the season in 2022-23, until he wasn't and required another surgery, which had another 6-week re-evaluation time at the start of training camp. Never returned, ruled out for the season, still experiencing pain, and now this. 3rd surgery, likely out for next season as well. And you probably caught my video from a couple days ago when the news broke on that. But I would not be shocked if Lonzo never plays another NBA game in his career. I sincerely hope I'm wrong, both as a Bulls fan, but also just for Lonzo, who has been struggling with this being prevented from playing the game that he loves due to circumstances out of his control. But it's hard for me to see a world in which he comes back from something like this after being away from the game for so long, or at least coming back and not suffering subsequent injuries. So maybe the curse is real. The curse of the Bulls. Maybe it's karma to Jerry Reinsdorf for being such a cheapskate over the years. Maybe it's Jerry Krause cursing this team from above. I don't know. But just for once, I would like for the Bulls to catch some good luck. Seems like every season we're going through something. And as Bulls fans, a lot of them, who probably don't even remember the last time the Bulls won a championship in 1998, we're dying to see this team get back to the glory days. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.